Years ago, there was a great comic book company called EC Comics, and they're the ones who started Mad Magazine, but before that they were doing The Vault of Horror and The Crypt of Terror and books like that. They were really wonderful, but some people objected. They felt they were a little too violent. So the comic book publishers got together and formed an organization called I think it was called the Comic Book Publishers Association of America, and it was a self-censorship body where they formed some rules of conduct. They're not allowed to have any rape, or they're not allowed to show blood or discuss drugs, things like that. And all the publishers agreed to that. And somehow or other, it served to make the books a lot tamer, and eventually EC Comics suspended all their publication, and the only thing they had was Mad Magazine after a while. There was only one time that we had a big problem with the code. I had received a letter from the Office of Health, Education, and Welfare in Washington. This was years ago, and right after Spider-Man became popular, it must have been in the late 60s, maybe the early 70s, I have no memory for dates, but the letter said that recognizing the popularity of Spider-Man with young people, we think it would be great if you would do an anti-drug story in your comics that your young readers could read, and it would do a lot of good. Well, we know better than to just obviously preach to young people, because that's not the way to reach them. But I found a way to do a 3-part Spider-Man story, and within the confines of that plot, we had one of Spider-Man's friends who had taken an overdose of something, and he was standing on a rooftop, and he thought he could fly, and it was up to Spider-Man to save him before he jumped, and Spider-Man did and gave him a lecture on what an idiot he was to take whatever drug. I know nothing about drugs. I didn't even know what to call the drug. I just said he took something and he overdosed. But at any rate, the story worked very well, but what happened was when we submitted the book to the comic book code office, they rejected it, these 3 books. And I said, what are you rejecting it for? And they said, according to the code, you're not allowed to mention drugs. And I said, but we're not telling kids to take drugs. It's an anti-drug element in a story. He said, that doesn't matter. According to the code, you cannot mention drugs. Well, I felt that was just so stupid and sophomoric on their part that we took the code symbol off the covers of our books, and we published the books anyway. Of course, over the years, comic books have gotten darker anyway, and a lot of them today aren't that dissimilar to the old Tales from the Crypt. We still, over at Marvel anyway, we still try to differentiate between exciting and violent. We try not to make our books violent, but we try to get a lot of excitement and a lot of danger and suspense and things like that. And of course, in our vampire stories like Blade, you get all of that you could ever want. See, a strange thing has happened in comics today. Years ago, when we first started Marvel, the age of the readership was about, they'd start with 6 and go up to 12 or 14 or so. And over the years, as we tried to write more intelligent comics and get better vocabularies and concentrate on characterization and on plotting, the age of the readership rose. In fact, after a while, we had as many college readers as young readers. But now, strangely enough, there aren't as many young readers for these comics, which are thought of as children's literature, as there are older readers. If you go to the average comic book store and speak to one of the proprietors, he'll probably tell you most of his customers are over the age of 20. And these darker books that we have now seem to be very appealing to the older readers. I personally think we're going to have to start lightening the books a little, or doing books that are lighter, so we don't lose too many of our younger readers. But right now, this business of darker stories, such as the old Batman, The Dark Knight, which was one of the things that started it, and vampire stories, which we've had for years, and all the heaviness and more earthiness that seems to be in the comics now, while a lot of it represents a lot of good writing, I'm afraid it may be tending to drive away some younger readers. So we have to figure out what to do about that.